Kevlin Henney, technical neglect. NewCrafts 2024. What's this? What's this about? Hello, I'm Chris Athanas. I'm a KMP developer. Tech support said they're coming out Tuesday to close that thing up, and I really hope they come out this time. I'm gonna hold my breath. All right, so I'm gonna react to this really low subscriber count. I'm gonna go give them a like and subscribe. About this technical neglect about NewCrafts 2024. I like Kevlin Henney is probably the best of all the software architect group for me, at least, because he's like has you think about how to think about your problem, not just your problem. It's like how to think about your problem. How about think about the solutions about to make your problem, not just here's the solution. Follow these six easy steps or one weird trick to make your software development go faster. But like he's usually a little bit more philosophical. He's obviously done a lot of software development, and he's a little bit more high level, which is what most people really are asking about. But it's kind of like you have to have a philosophy, and you have to kind of like have some limits about what's possible, what's not possible, and some limits to humans and what we're capable of, and what and just philosophically what we're capable of. Like, you know, I just did a video on time estimates. Like estimates are, it's really kind of wrong to ask people to lie because you're asking us to make stuff up which we don't know, and then you're holding us to it, and then you're mad when we don't. The estimates are wrong. It's like, well, because we really don't know. You give us a time frame, we can make progress in there, but how long is it going to take to do that? We don't know, man. It's just ugly feeling. So let's see what Kevlin has to say. Whoa.
Okay, so first of all, this is the pre-talk.
The audio is going up and down. I'm not doing that.
The first thing to note is that whenever people talk about AI bias, where does AI bias come from? It comes from us. I want you to look at the room and notice the bias. The stairs are there, therefore all the people are over there. Hi. There's actually quite a lot of space over here. The other thing is I'm surprised to see any of you. I've had so many people come up to me and apologize for not attending my talk that I thought
I'm gonna do 1.5.
this would just be a quiet conversation with myself. And I have no problem talking to myself, but you know, I'm glad you stayed. Paris, Friday, last thing. Yeah, I'm impressed you're here. Other things we're going to set.
He's the closing speech, okay.
So what are some of the things in the talk and some of the things not in the talk? Some of the things in the talk, all photographs except one were taken by me. So
nice. You know, so we switched from, I guess he was photographing books for a while. Now he's doing landscapes. I think I like the landscapes better.
Imagery, no AI-generated imagery, all the rest of it. So that's what's in the talk. You're invited to guess which photograph is not one I took. Okay, I'll be testing you later. But also...
I don't get the joke. It's an inside joke.
I'm not going to say whether or not it's because they melted, because it's been a long time since yesterday. I'm not going to say whether it's because I have found a new revenue stream in iceberg consultancy. Please see me afterwards. I have some thoughts on this. You show me your iceberg.
I guess you had to be there.
They're legit. You know, this is my plan B career. We might hit a few rocks, but there is a boat. But you know, I want to manage the expectations, but I'm quite happy to discuss icebergs afterwards. Now, you might say, well, hang on, come on, Kevin, that's not really fair. I turned up expecting icebergs, but this is clearly an act of neglect on your part. And you're right, I am going to talk about neglect, just not iceberg neglect. I'm going to talk about technical neglect.
Okay.
I'm going to explain what it is. I'm also going to give you a little bit of a journey, because I also want to talk about the words that we use. And some of the words that we use are also mangled up with slashes and ats. We live in an era of fragmented social media, and I have no idea where I am. You can find me everywhere. So, you know, look for the internet unique name. Sometimes I'm lucky and it's Kevlin. Other times you have to go the full name. But yes, you can find me posting in a number of different places. Now, one of the things I quite enjoy about putting together a talk is the happy accidents, the serendipity. And
I gotta say, a lot of this stuff that we take for granted and think is just amazing technology that we based everything on, we're a lot of happy accidents, and a lot of this stuff is just totally random and driven by people at the time. They got the thing in them that made them want to do it. Otherwise, because if it didn't happen, it wasn't going to happen because nobody else was even doing it at the time. It was a lot of that.
Number of times people always sort of say, oh, I finished my talks weeks in advance. And I'm kind of like, no, that's not what I do. The only reason this talk was ready is that I've already done a version of it, except that it wasn't ready. I was just going through a file of things the other day, and I found something that I said, which I actually said, and I thought, wow, this is good timing. The words shape what we think, so if we choose the wrong words, it will take longer to discover the thing that matters. And I thought, wow, that sounds, you know, if that hadn't been me, I'd go, that's a really good quote.
Okay, but I'm going to respond to that just like, it's the definitions of words. It's the word definition problem, the word dash definition problem. everyone's got a different definition. So even if we choose the words perfectly correct, everyone's gonna have a different definition about what those words are, and we have to discuss what those are meaning because everyone's bringing their different experience, and even if with the same word, everyone has a different definition in their particular experience matrix, which is their brain, their personal history. So we're not going to get around that.
Was in response to somebody else, we were generally talking about a number of points. But notice, specifically what I'm describing here is I'm not simply talking about the idea of sort of, certainly not language determinism, a little bit of language relativism, but it's the idea that sometimes we will get there in the end. Sometimes it just takes us a little longer. We get distracted by our vocabulary, and our vocabulary starts forming movements, and it becomes used, it becomes currency within and between our teams and across our organizations. And
I mean, I guess it can be used like that, but it's again, this the definition problem. Maybe the words can be switched around. Like, that's been a big thing. Everyone's throwing around the same word with all kinds of different meanings. They're depending on the context. Even inside of a context, they'll switch context without letting you know that they switch context and use the same word, like the word process. Let's keep going.
specifically what I want to refer to is a little thing that we kind of confuse. Cause and effect. What do I mean by this? I mean, how can we confuse cause and effect? Humans do it all the time. We notice coincidences and try to relate them.
Yeah.
And sometimes there is a correlation, and sometimes there is a causal relationship, and sometimes we get that causal relationship back to front.
Correct.
We misattribute.
We are a pattern recognizers. If we're in this field of work, we are pattern recognizers, pattern creators, pattern recognizers.
Things. This is common vocabulary in modern development environments. It's common enough that it's actually, in some.
I did a video about this, which you should look back in my list about technical debt. It's very interesting what it means. It just means that the moment you figure out there's a different way of doing it that's a lot easier, now you have technical debt. That's all it is. That's all it means. And then people took that thing to mean all kinds of stuff, financial and all this other stuff. And the reason why it was a financial kind of sounding thing, because he was working in a market with a domain of financial people who needed to kind of understand what the reasoning was, why he needed to go back and refactor some of this stuff. That's because the interest rate on this technical debt was very high, and it was causing them to slow down right now for the things they wanted him to do. And he needed a reason to tell them. So it was very domain specific as well. And then people just took that idea and ran with it and extended the metaphor way beyond what it is. Can we get financing on that debt? Maybe somebody else can buy our debt. It's like, no, that's not what it was meaning. That's not what he meant. But people took it that way, and it's like caused a lot of confusion. That's that word definition problem we've got. Can't get away from as humans.
Organizations, it's escaped the technical teams. It is a language, it's a term that people throughout the organization may have some familiarity with. Technical debt. And a lot of teams say, we have a technical debt problem. That's an effect. We're going to dig into this. It's certainly, there's something there, and it may be contributing to be a problem, but it may actually be a manifestation of a problem. In other words, it's an effect. What is the cause? Well, what I'm going to describe today is that one of the main causes, and I will clarify what I mean by technical debt as we go through, and I'm missing a word when I say technical debt. If you listen closely, you can hear the silence before it. It's written in silent character. Well, honestly, I've been reading French signs for the last few days. There's a lot of silence in those words. Yeah, so that's what I learned at school. When you learn French, that bit's silent, and that bit is not pronounced the way you thought it was. Whereas if you've learned English, none of this is pronounced the way you thought it was. So, it's a fair trade. Honestly, French can be so compressible. Yeah, but that's the thing. I am using a silent word before technical debt. But I want to focus on technical neglect. And why is this a challenge?
I like that word, technical neglect. It's a new one for me. It definitely entails things that have to be cut with corners to make schedules, which are very practical, but people like sweep under the rug like it's not there. It's totally there. It's neglect, right? Just because you're being ignored doesn't mean it's a healthy thing. Let's keep going.
Or rather, why is it that we are not identifying this and talking about this more? Because neglect is a thing that doesn't happen. We're very good at seeing things that do happen. We're not so good at seeing things that don't happen.
Correct. Yeah? I love it already. This is something that people don't talk about, and it's like, it's glaringly obvious, but it's because it's like, not in polite company.
Did you notice that thing just now that didn't happen? Yeah, exactly. So this is the issue. It is hard to see. Now, we have an example of neglect here. What happens when nobody looks after something for 35 years, where there's a place where there's no human habitation for 35 years? Well, this. Yeah, it's a thing that doesn't happen. A thing called maintenance. So here's the boat. You'll notice the iceberg's already melted. And I want to talk about this boat.
I wonder what that joke is.
Yeah, not this boat. This boat was actually, if I remember correctly, it was intact. It didn't have any holes in it, but let's just pretend it ran across a small iceberg, and there are holes in it. And you are out on the water. And I want to solve this problem two ways. I want to solve it the way as software people we would solve it, and then I want to solve it as everybody else on the planet would solve it, okay? So, there's a hole. There's water coming in. The boat is sinking. What are you going to do? Well, actually, with software developers, there's a couple of different responses. And it depends on your organization. In certain organizations, it's, well, let's have a meeting about this boat. When can you do? Well, I can probably do next Monday. Okay, well, yeah. I think we've got about 10 minutes before we go underwater, but let's schedule a meeting for next Monday. So there's those organizations. They're probably running safe or something like that.
Ooh, zing.
Then there are other organizations where what happens is you have lived with this for so long, the boat is always sinking. This is how we live. This is software development.
We have a sump pump at the bottom of the thing. We got a bilge pump down there. We installed a bilge pump because we couldn't find the leak.
This is habituation. This is learned helplessness. We just watch it. Yeah. This is what boating is.
I mean, a lot of organizations are set up like that because they get these clearances from these committees to actually go fix the leaks. I might have to push it up the phone, but that's a big budget item. We're gonna have to see how many. We're going to reallocate. It's not going to look good on the quarterly report.
Then we've got the proactive crowd. Yeah, I see you. You're here because you're at a conference. You're going like, yeah.
And that's almost as bad.
We're going to have a workshop, and we're going to empty the boat. We're going to work out the most effective way of emptying the boat. We're going to keep that water coming out. I noticed that half the Dutch people have already fled. They are the people you need to speak to about kind of emptying things out. This is good. But you're going to empty out the boat. That's what you're going to do. Brilliant. The rest of the population will go, hey, there's water coming in. Maybe we should stop the water coming in. Crazy idea, right? Now, the funny thing is that I have seen this more than a couple of times and brought home vividly in a couple of organizations where I visited and I ran a workshop on, what to do with your legacy code. Let's create refactoring paths. In other words, let's describe the journey so you can make it real. If you can visualize a journey, then it makes it a little bit more real. It's like, here's how we're going to get out of where we are now. And implicitly, I had made an assumption. And that's the interesting thing. Assumptions are invisible until they are pointed out to you or until they are contradicted. And there was and one organization was actually very
nice point. It's true.
Effective. They said, "Oh yeah, that really helped. That really helped, and they made a difference. They addressed their unmanaged technical debt. They addressed some of their legacy issues. That's great. And a couple of years later, hey, we've got that legacy problem again because it turned out, although they had learned what to do with it, they hadn't learned how not to keep creating it. They reached a kind of steady state. The water is still coming in.
Alan Kay. So I talk about some of this stuff. This is techniques. Alan Kay brought this up a long time ago. And, his whole thing about was when he invented it with the phrase object-oriented programming, he wasn't talking about the objects, the classes, the hierarchies. He was talking about messages and having APIs and having a cellular structure where all these things are passed between messages, between entities. And eventually all systems are going to have to do that to manage the complexity. Now, inside, you can do different things, but on the outside surface has to be APIs. And figuring that out and where those lines cut and where they split on the different processes for whatever problem space you're in, that's art.
So we're going to go on a little journey. I'm going to take you back to 1980. I'm Annie Lehman. It's a classic paper, this. I know you have been at this conference and people have been recommending papers and books and books and papers. You are overwhelmed with this. That's why you have a weekend. But I would like to offer this one to you. And also there is, I believe, there is a summary of this paper by Adrian Collier. It's just sort of a couple of screens worth. Programs, life cycles, and laws of software evolution. This is very much a culmination of Lehman's work in the 1970s. So we might say this is 1970s observations, 50 years old at this point, really.
Well, it's still apparently useful because we're still running on the same hardware and software, basically.
And what I'm interested in is this observation. As an evolving program is continually changed, its complexity, reflecting deteriorating structure, increases unless work is done to maintain or reduce it. Now, I find this fascinating for a number of reasons. There are a number of words it avoids, partly to do with things like time travel and the fact that we don't really have it available to us. Doesn't use the word legacy, doesn't use the phrase technical debt. But what I find interesting is this very simple observation, and let's be very clear. The scale of software systems in the 1970s was significantly smaller. Certainly, software was becoming more and more pervasive, but it was nowhere near as interwoven into the fabric of everyday existence as we have now.
Right.
We did not have anywhere near as many software developers. And yet
Correct.
These observations, this idea about, hey, guess what, this is a bit harder than we thought. There was an assumption. There were a number of assumptions. In fact, Laurent in his session before kind of pointed out that there was an assumption once upon a time. It's like, hey, we didn't expect bugs to happen. That was a real...
They didn't have version control when this was written. They didn't have version control back then. Can you imagine a world without version control? How crazy it all is and how insane everything is. Holy crap, man.
Surprised
how anything got done is just a miracle. It was because the programs were much smaller. But even then, when they started scaling up, just getting all that stuff right, it was just still a nightmare. It's because they didn't think about it until after the fact. It was like they were just rushing to write the things, not fix them and monitor them and maintain them and upgrade them and extend them and make them understandable. That wasn't part of the plan. That was when we figured out later. It's like, oh shit, this is now a problem. We need to do something different, and it hasn't been addressed yet, really, at all.
People who first started developing software. Okay. In fact, we can even go back to Ada Lovelace, who managed to find a couple of bugs in Charles Babbage's code in the middle of the 19th century, which he noticed these when translating his talks from Italian. It's just like, wait a minute, there's a bug there. But this is the whole idea. We were surprised by the defect level.
I don't know that story. I should look into that story.
But the thing that also surprised us is when we have code that sticks around and we have to go back to it and change it. And it turns out that the changes are surprisingly hard and become harder with time. And this observation here,
because of the way, because they're all built, how this stuff was written was super. Everything is all coupled together because that was just how you did it. Because how else would you do it? That printer needs to talk to that thing, so we do the things that the CPU does the printer bits. I mean, they didn't really know. Hadn't scaled it up yet. We hadn't had the problems. We were just glad to get the thing running. Oh my god, it's actually printing and it's not breaking down every 3 seconds. It's like, that was a major achievement.
he's saying, as an evolving program is continuing to change its complexity, reflecting deteriorating structure. He's not saying you're doing bad development. This is the really interesting thing. It's not to do with you have done bad development. If you have done great development, then it probably deteriorates at a slower rate. But he's actually saying that it's built into the very process of change.
Yeah, you can't get around it.
If you change something, its overall quality, to add a feature or modify a rule or something like that, there is a chance that its overall quality will deteriorate unless you put extra work in. And this is implicit in the universe. The idea is that we often, when we make any change, we are upsetting
there's no free lunch.
something that, for the sake of argument, already works. We're upsetting an equilibrium. Let's just say we have the perfect code. Just close your eyes. But not too much. I don't need to sleep just yet. Close your eyes. Imagine that. It's the perfect code. So I'm going to give you this kind of beautiful baseline start. This is the joy of thought experiments. We can imagine the impossible. But now, you're going to make a small change. The thing I'm going to have to point out to you at this point, just in case you forget, is you are human. Humans have this thing called attention, focus. It's a visual metaphor that we use. By definition, when we are focusing on something, it means we are actively or inactively not focusing on other things. We have taken our attention away from everything else.
Right.
We cannot focus on everything, because that's not focus.
Right, we got seven to 10 items in our short-term stack, and that's the maximum that we can possibly think on at any given time. And if you try and do more than that, it starts to errorate. It starts to increase exponentially.
Okay, so by definition, you want
We're very
to withdraw your
limited.
attention from all of this.
Our hardware sucks. Well, for doing the stuff that computers is good at, our hardware sucks. But for making the computer do things, the computer can never do that. The computer can never do the things we're doing, which is dealing with humans, trying to figure out what they want, making these machines do something useful for humans, so we can do something easier than they're doing it now, so we can have a market and sell that solution in the market for money, so we can send our kids to college and spray braces, new cars, Cadillacs, TVs, new TVs. Let's keep going.
Changing one tiny, tiny line of code, and that is your whole system, one tiny, tiny line of code. By definition, you are not paying attention to everything else. You have a simplified understanding of it. And it's only later, either you or a colleague will observe, by changing that, we no longer need this. And it depends what your feedback cycle's like. It might be by changing this, you've actually caused a bug, and then your tests will pick that up. Or you've actually changed the style or the paradigm of the code, and you moved it in a new direction, and perhaps that's a direction you'd like to embrace to make your code more consistent in that new direction. The point there is, by definition, you've upset something that was already quite happy, and you've done something that was done with the best intent, and perhaps you applied your best practices, but by definition, it's a system, and most of it is not in your attention span. Deterioration. It is very much, and we're used to this in the real world. I go to... So I'm at home next week, and I'm going to cook a couple of meals, and the way I'm going to do this, I'm not going to go and declare to my wife and younger one, I'm just going to go to the kitchen to make a mess. I mean, there will be a truth in that, but that is not my goal. I am going to go to make a meal, and I can be as tidy as I want, but there will still be things that need to be cleared up. It is a side effect of doing this. So what my layman is saying is, in order to maintain the integrity, the quality that you have to put extra work in addition to what you're already doing.
And most organizations just don't want to pay this cost. They delay it and defer it, delay it and defer it, delay it and defer it, because you don't have to pay it. You don't have to clean the kitchen up after each meal. You can let it sit there. There's no rule that says you have to clean it up. But if you keep letting it sit there, eventually one of these meals is going to make you sick. And then you're not going to make any meals. You'll be looking in bed, I should have cleaned up a little. That's a pretty good metaphor.
And this is as true in an information system, because it's still a system, and it still has connections and assumptions. And well, we still have to do something about it. Now, what I also find interesting here is the word maintain. It's actually using maintenance correctly. And what do I mean by that? Maintenance is a word that we have taken on board. We use it extensively in software. But we normally use maintenance depends on the organization. Maintenance means a variety of things. Maintenance means bug fixing in some places, in a lot of places. It's like, well, are you maintaining it? It was always broken. Yeah, it's not maintenance in the real world is to do with wear and tear, that things wear down the more you use them. That's not what's happening.
Right. This is a factory term. But in the terms of software, it's more like still looking at how this fits in, and hopefully your system's decoupled so you don't take everything down, and taking stuff out that's not there anymore and having effort to do that. It's very rare. Usually people just start over and do a new version. In the process of doing that, that's when they lop off stuff as they make a new version of the software so they can get rid of these parasites. And that's maintenance as well, I guess. It's it's how in nature, one of the reasons they think sexual reproduction happened was or it was invented or whatever was to get rid of parasites, because the new little being is parasite free. The adult has to deal with all the parasites and has to deal with, will just go away, and the new one will survive and be fresh and new.
The idea is that perhaps when we interact with the code, we are upsetting it.
Based on the experience of the adult.
It would maintain.
Because it's a Gen X living creature. No.
It's original. We need to put extra work in. But that's not what we're saying. Is that bug? Maybe that bug's been in there a year. That's not maintaining it. You're doing the exact opposite. You're actually creating something that was not there. You're not maintaining a thing. You're eliminating a thing. Alternatively, in many organizations, maintenance just means software development. Yeah, it's just like, oh yeah, we've done the initial release. Okay, what's everything? What's everything else? That's software development. It's all software development. Yeah, so it depends.
Yeah.
So, here's the thing.
Unless these managers have like this intuition or understanding, or have gone down here and understand like it's really important to do this, or design a system where this becomes somewhat easy or not a trivial thing as opposed to a devastating blow to the production. Yeah, this is an art that's domain specific. It's very much like individual taste, like what's important, what's not important, what can be left in, what needs to be there. All these nuanced decisions. Let's keep going.
Let's kind of understand this one. Let's dig around and find out, because the point is that maintenance is a metaphor. So I'm going to refer to the Oxford English Dictionary. The OED is an interesting thing. Specifically, it's interesting because if you want to find out how a word is used, this dictionary is entirely useless to you. This is not a usage dictionary. A usage dictionary lists things that the most commonly used term, or most commonly used version of a word, will be the first, and then the next most common, and then the next most common. This is an etymological dictionary. It will start as far back as the word starts. So for some words, you go back 1,000 years. And if you are a word nerd, this is fantastic. It's just like, oh my goodness, I didn't realize these connections between the languages, and they went through these different forms. If you are trying to find out, how do I use this word correctly, this is not the dictionary for you. I'm a word nerd. I have dictionaries, physical and, believe it or not, on DVDs.
I know he likes to talk about it.
Just so I don't have to go and subscribe to stuff, so my movements are not being analyzed. The only problem is that we only have one optical drive in the house, and it looks like a piece of history. Anyway, what's the word I
loves that
look up?
optical drive.
The figure of speech in which a name or descriptive term is transferred to some object, different from, but analogous to, that which is properly applicable. Okay, so the term metaphor is what we use extensively. We use metaphor in software all over the place. It comes originally from the Greek metaphora, meaning literally to transfer. We are transferring meaning. And the point about this is we are basically saying, hey, here's something that is abstract or complex or unfamiliar. I would like to explain it to you in terms of something that is concrete and familiar. So the things you understand here, I'm going to...
Humans love that. We can deal with that because you're actually giving us a little story to follow, a little story in our brain that makes us the correspondences between the thing we do know, the thing you're trying to explain, and the correspondences between them. Yeah, we definitely love that. We need that.
I outline points of correspondence. And you go, oh, yeah, now I get it. Okay, I understand. Now, this is important because by definition, this means that no metaphor can be perfect. It's not a perfect mapping. If a metaphor...
Because there would just be the thing. If there was a perfect metaphor, it would just be the thing, not the metaphor.
Metaphor is actually perfect, then it's not a metaphor. It's identity. Okay, so
right. Anyway, it would just be the thing, exactly.
Explains, oh, this metaphor is.
He said it better than me.
It's imperfect. Well, yes, of course it is. But we can discuss the degree of imperfection. But the thing is, in software, we do this all the time. Just look through your code base and look at all the names and the concepts. So on my laptop, I've got a desktop. Actually, the difference between my real-world desktop and my laptop desktop is tidy. My real-world desktop is a mess. It is chaos.
Mine's the exact opposite.
And
my desktop is extremely tiny, but my laptop desktop has got stuff all over the place.
When I sit at home in my office behind my chaotic desktop, I have a window in my office. I also have windows on that. What can you do? It gives you a systematic vocabulary. Metaphorical entailment gives you the vocabulary. Oh, you open and you close a window. You don't
Yeah, it's a great metaphor.
run a window. That's the language of engines, start and run. We do that with code. We use the engine metaphor quite a lot. Crash, yeah? So in other words, it gives us a system of vocabulary. Of course, it's not perfect. I mean, how much does it cost to resize a window in the real world? Yeah?
Very expensive.
It's not cheap. My wife and I have done it. It's really cheap on that thing over there. So we understand this. We use metaphors absolutely everywhere. We're talking about file systems, networks, the work.
A lot of these metaphors, by the way, weren't just like invented wholeheartedly. There was a whole there's different types of styles, different words people are using, all kinds of different stuff. And these, we just came up with these ones that we use all the time, but there was an evolution of all these words, and they've changed meaning over time as well. I can't think of any examples right now, but let's just keep going.
And this idea that metaphors are deep to the way that we even think was really catalogued and captured very nicely by this book. You can kind of tell how old it is, 1980. Magic year, that, clearly. But nobody produces book covers like this. Lakoff and Johnson, Metaphors We Live By.
He loves book covers.
And they basically said, hey, metaphors, this is not just poetry. This is actually systems to the way we think, how we use
prepositions. I think it's story. I think we need stories to like help understand how things are. Like our alphabet is based on stories of things and the nature and how it applies to a spiritual world as opposed to a material world, as opposed to intersocial. It's got all these overlays. It's really quite interesting.
And how we have ideas. The very fact that you might say, oh,
it's all
you see that village
of
in front of the mountain. Mountains don't have fronts. Just pause for a moment. Mountains do not have fronts. People have fronts. We're relating to the mountain as if it's a person. Mountains don't have fronts. They're perfectly symmetric and they don't care about you. So the point here is we are using a lot of equipment to give ourselves an understanding of things that are potentially difficult to understand.
Yeah,
yes, it's a metaphor is understanding, experiencing one kind of thing in terms of another. Now, that doesn't mean that we can't say what is a good metaphor. And I wrote a piece for Orion Radar.
Yeah, that has a lot of different features, and usually they're fallen down in most aspects of the one that you're trying to focus in on. And it's so dangerous to people overextend the metaphor or expand the metaphor past what it was meant to be. Like technical debt was one of them. Yeah, it's very much art and very context specific, and they also will run away from you without you having anything to do. You can't call them back once people have started making. There's a story that's line associated with it. Yeah.
Years back on exactitude and technical debt, where I outlined three qualities of what makes a metaphor good.
Yeah.
To be considered good, a metaphor has to offer a number of points of useful correspondence with what is being described. Because if it doesn't do that, that's not going to be helpful. Another quality is that it should not have two.
And most of people just have one, not multiple ones. So when they start sending it, they're going in different directions. It's no, that's not what we meant. But we all have to do this. It's how we learn. Because we're trying to transmit knowledge. And the knowledge is transmitted, and we have to use metaphors. What else are you supposed to use? Unless you already know the thing already, and then you can do details of it. But unless it's just, here you go. It's okay, what is this?
Too many obvious points of conflict. Okay, if something essential to it is distracting everybody, then maybe that's not a good metaphor.
Yeah.
There will always be things that are true of this that are not true of this.
Correct.
If these are the dominant characteristics, they're going to get in the way. They're not going to assist understanding. They're going to be obstacles to understanding.
Agree.
The third one, however, is an interesting one because it depends. The third quality of metaphor that makes it effective is familiarity to its audience. It depends who you're talking to.
Right, exactly. It has to be, you have to be for the person that has to understand the metaphor with, have some relation with it before they can identify the correspondences and see the compare and contrast the differences and the similarities. Yeah, of course. Yeah, that's where that technical debt, that's why he keeps bringing that one up, because that's a really good one. Because people, if you don't understand that term was used and invented for a particular person at a particular moment for a particular project, that would be better to have some other term for another domain. If you don't understand that was where that came from, then you're going to be very confused and oh yeah, it's just this, it's that. It's no, it's not what you think it is.
As to whether or not something is effective. And that audience can shape it. So when talking about the issues of code that we might find in legacy code bases, one of the ways of understanding it that I always found really helpful was entropy. And that one worked for me and a number of other people at the company that I was at, because honestly, half of us had degrees in physics. So entropy,
Okay,
yeah, that
yeah,
makes sense. And
yeah.
then you talk to
If everyone's got physics 3, then entropy would make sense. But if you bring that over to the finance guys, they're going to go, what the hell are you talking about, man? Could you put that in English for me?
somebody who's a skilled developer and does not have any kind of background in physics or information theory or anything like that, and you say, oh, it's got high entropy. It's like, what? So now you are in the position of, oh, let me explain this abstract concept that you don't understand so that you can
Right.
understand this abstract concept that you don't understand.
Right.
This is not a good mapping, but it does mean it's audience dependent. It also tells us why it is that technical debt is popular, because debt.
How it could just so your code gets dusty if you don't to pay attention to it. It'll just get dusty on its own. That would be a nice one for cleaning people. Oh right, it's gotta get dusty. You gotta clean that. Okay, it's like the same stuff. You have to do it for your audits. And as software developers, it's really important as you're switching and moving along these domains is to really talk to your customers, and you will get customers just by speaking their language and trying to understand their language and their perspective as opposed to imposing yours down on. That is kind of the skill of a developer, a software developer, that the AI is not going to be able to really understand and do because it's not going to be able to do these kind of leaps. Let's keep going.
It's a shared experience.
It'll try and tell you some metaphors if you tell it, but for which metaphor is going to work with your customers at that for that particular moment in time for that project. That's human. That's a total human thing, man, because it's all how it feels inside and what the choice of words are and the connotations and all that stuff. It's curated based on taste and context and language and ethics and morals and culture, history.
It's a cultural experience, and some cultures more than others.
Yeah, there we go. Like,
So
see,
here's
we're
a-
on the same wavelength. I haven't previewed this thing. Me and Kevlin we are on the same. I kind of get where he's coming from. He's more experienced and more technical. He's way better presenter than me. Look at me. But like, yeah, but we're on the same wavelength for sure.
Interesting one. Blog by Steve Freeman. This blog kind of jumps in and out of existence. Bad code isn't technical debt, it's an unhedged call option.
Okay. I
Okay,
mean,
who knows what an unhedged call option is?
I don't know what that is, but the finance people go, oh yeah, okay, that makes sense.
And there you are, fingers on one hand. Right, that, and this, I love this observation, somebody else. For people in fintech, this is a really interesting analogy. And that, Jonathan Kasdan made this observation, and that's great. If you are in this space, then it's just like, I'm with you.
And if it's accurate, if it kind of has lots of similarities, man, use that stuff. Absolutely. And if people on the outside don't understand it, that doesn't matter.
You're speaking my language. You've given me a mental framework that I can quantify something abstract and unfamiliar, and
making
I already
things
deal with this.
understandable for people. That's one of our key added value is to break people's down that are in the domain out of their limited thinking, so we can solve a problem that can, we have to put those things together for them. That's one of our value adds. That's honestly one of the biggest values we do add as software developers.
This is great. But everybody else outside, it's just like, can we go through the whole call option thing and hedged and unhedged? That's not a useful framework for us. Doesn't mean it's necessarily bad, but it's not effective for the larger audience, which is why sometimes, and I've had discussions with people who sometimes say, oh, in our domain, we've ended up calling it this. And somebody messaged me from the medical domain, and they had to explain what their metaphor was because I didn't understand it. But that's awesome. The point. They find something that is more suitable. For the general audience,
exactly right.
This is not useful. So,
not just with like code quality, but like in general, speaking to your customers in the terms that they use about the things they want to do, their problems that they want to have solved, and how that solution will happen in their words. That's the stuff, man. People love you for that, as opposed to you overwhelming them with all the technical jargon. You're using their technical jargon and trying to absorb it and flipping the script, and they will just. People love that. I swear to God, I've done some of that stuff. They're just like, who are you? How are you? What are you doing? It's like, well, I'm trying to make money off you guys, so I'm gonna understand where you're coming from better than you do. You're like, here's my money.
Let's talk about some other words. Let's go and raid the dictionary. Legacy. So let's talk about legacy, because this is a word we use quite a lot. Now, so we've got designating software or hardware which, although outdated or limiting, is an integral part of a computer system and difficult to replace. Okay. So here's the thing. It depends on your age. It depends when you entered software development.
Right.
If you are of a certain age, you're going to go, wow, 1989, that was really late. If you're of a younger age, you're going to go, yeah, that's always been the case. It's like forever.
Yeah.
Yeah. I come from the former category. I am astonished how late this term actually entered use.
Yeah, I am too.
I know I was using it in the early 90s,
but
and it's just that we didn't have a word for it. People did not think they said stuff is unmaintainable. They didn't have a systematic vocabulary for it. It wasn't properly recognized. It was, oh, we must have this because of some deficiency. Mm-hmm. Rather than actually, this is kind of intrinsic to the way that a bunch of people doing a bunch of stuff happens.
Yeah. It's natural. There's no way around it.
There are other definitions. I think one of the ones that people informally use. I have done workshops on this. I always tell people, give me your definitions. Code that someone else wrote.
Definitely feel that way. When I first heard about legacy code, that was definitely my definition. It's like being a co-hired into a project. It's like, okay, so you're like going to make some new stuff. No, we're going to fix the old stuff first. What do you mean fix the old stuff? Well, I got a few bugs that need to be cleared up. And it's like, well, who are the people here still here? Oh, no, they all left. So, if they have documentation, nope, just a source code. Like, look at the source code. There's no comments. There's nothing. Nope, you're gonna have to figure it out. We hired you on. You're the best. So get to it. I'm like, oh man, I'm in legacy code land.
Most people are really kind of like code that I wrote yesterday. Sometimes they appreciate that. They understand their own limitations. We're going to come back to this one. Now, this was an interesting one from Angel Sierra, which I saw recently.
I like this definition.
And I thought it was interesting for a number of reasons. Legacy code is often defined as code that makes more design decisions than the team working on it. Now, this is interesting.
I've definitely been this person, and that's just definitely the case. No, you can't change that. That has to be there. Well, how's it work? Well, nobody really knows. But don't touch it.
Reasons. Wow, that's a really good definition. I love that because it talks about a balance of control. Balance of control is effectively outside the human part of the team.
There we go.
Okay.
Yeah.
The code has made the decision. The code is sitting there at your meetings. Oh, it's quiet in the corner.
Oh no, it's loud because if you try and say we need to get rid of it, the manager's going, we got $1 million in that code. We can't get rid of it now. We brought you on to fix a few bugs.
And everybody says, yeah, we've got this plan. And the code's sitting there, The code has the ultimate veto. That's when you have a legacy system. You've got some great ideas. You've come back from a conference. You are fired up with...
Well, it's the manager, really, it says now.
Energy.
But the code agrees.
And concepts. And the code's going like, nah, not today. Oh, that's legacy. But the other thing is that... although Angel says legacy code is often defined, actually, I've never seen this definition before, and I Googled it. So, I thought, this is great. I wish I'd come across this before. This is fantastic. But
it's a good one.
They went on to say, could we define a legacy process as one that makes more decisions on how a team functions than the team itself? Oh, okay. Yeah. This is very rich as a source of...
That's all. It's cargo culting, all this stuff, these best practices. We got best practices. We got we're doing clean code, solid, and
of thinking. So when we're using this word, the curious thing is that legacy has been inverted. We often talk about legacy by default in English as being a very positive thing.
Yeah, exactly. When I first heard it, it was like legacy. Oh wow. It's like, no, not oh wow.
A person leaves a legacy. This is what they leave behind, and people think positively. Yeah. They're great ideas. They're great wealth. They're great whatever. In software, we don't mean that. The default meaning of legacy is not a good thing. We have to, if we mean it to be good, we have to put words like good in front of it, just to remind people it's the other way around.
I mean, it's good because someone made money, but now we're going to have to change it. But how it was built was not designed to be changed, and everybody left because they tried. And they're like, we need to rewrite it. We can't just keep changing it. It's like, no, get out of here. We don't like it. We'll bring some people in here that'll change it.
A little inversion here. But I stumbled across this report last year, I think it was published a couple of years ago. US-based. So over $1 trillion to keep the lights on. Legacies drag on productivity. And you can find a number of different...
Yeah, this is the opportunity. This is what I'm talking about, the micro-monopoly, or using these AI tools to attack some niches and take some of the market share away from these people that are still stuck in legacy land. Yeah, that's the opportunity right now.
Examples around... describing the situation, but I found this one quite interesting in terms of the numbers. In 2019, a US Government Accountability Office report found the federal government spends more than $100 billion on IT and cyber-related investments annually. So that's just the big numbers, okay? We don't know if it's good or bad. Now it gets interesting. Of this amount, agencies typically spent about 80% on the operations and maintenance of existing IT investments, including legacy systems.
Wow. 80%. Well, I'm about 40 minutes in. I'm going to do a part 2 on this one, so... see me for part 2.